You can have an AI generate, a colorize function any day now, like
Yeah.
any second, in less than a second,
Yeah.
So
And okay, actually, I won't go on that soapbox, but I did have this for a lot of cases. One that stands out to me is the Sonner component in AMP, where when you like copy link to clipboard, it shows that little notification in the bottom right. That's called a
yeah,
Sonner. Who knew?
yeah,
And there's some libraries that did this, and they were very complex. They didn't quite work with the version of SvelteKit we were using, and they required like a different way of doing styling, and that's what everyone was
yeah,
recommending. But turns out, I mean, AI just wrote one that was exactly what we needed, very simple,
yeah.
and that is way, way simpler and better.
Welcome to episode 4 of Raising an Agent, our little internal podcast, our diary of excitement between Quinn, CEO of Sourcegraph, and myself, Torsten, while we're building a new thing, a new agent here at Sourcegraph. Hi, Quinn.
Hello, how's your coding been?
It's been pretty good. I spent all day yesterday building a new thing. The
It's
ability
good.
to see,
I love it.
yeah, you used it.
Yeah.
Bayang and I, then we had like a coding session. I did like a coding session in the afternoon with other people, and then I kind of went and started to convince them of AI and whatnot. And then we had a session, Bayang and I, and he said something at the end. He's like, "This is fun. This is not just pair programming. This is us, the two of us, watching another thing write the code." And it gives you a fun chance to talk about stuff when you're both just waiting for it. And I joke that Gen Z doesn't have to have 3 videos running at the same time with this. They can watch the two of us talk and another thing writes code in the background.
Yeah. Watch out, YouTube dev streamers.
Yeah,
People can
there
just
you
watch
go.
AI now.
Yeah, just watch AI code in the background. How has your coding been? You've been working a lot on server-side stuff, and now you're back in client-side land.
Yeah. And I have made it so it's easier to share threads. I'm making it so that you can have one that's truly public so anyone on the web can see it, which is
Yeah,
pretty cool. So you can show off the cool stuff you do. And I want to get more back into the client and having it treat feedback loops as a first class concept where it knows, in this part of the code base, here are the tests that it needs to run. Here's how it gets to the browser. And you can put that in the rules file, and we do. But the problem is the adherence is not 100%. And you want that to be 100%. But
yeah,
it's tricky to get right.
yeah. But it's. I said this to Bian yesterday, and we said this on previous episodes, right? That if you can really nail it down to a feedback loop and you know what it should do, and then just can go off and do stuff. Yeah, that once you have it, it's mind blowing. It's really mind blowing to see. I want to talk about a big topic, and I think, how do I start this? Maybe with the disclaimer. The disclaimer is that this is gonna sound over the top, fanatical, maybe, I don't know, but I think if we look at the trend lines here, the trajectory of what's happening and how we've been using it, and I also think that, we are maybe more risk tolerant right now. We're on the edge of using these tools, meaning we have it write a lot of our code. Like others say, I still use the chat functionality and copy and paste stuff over, and I'm like, even if I can move the function myself, I'll have the agent do it. And I'm all in. And I think if I follow the trajectory of where this is going, a lot of stuff about software is going to change, meaning code is going to get cheaper and how we treat code is going to change. It's not going to be as, I don't know, not this precious thing that we have to take care of, because we all know that there's, on one end of the spectrum, there's this handwritten, beautifully formatted, touched by 10 people with lots of expertise, nice file, and on the other there's like the auto-generated 5,000 lines C file that nobody wants to look at because it's auto-generated. And I think with AI, a lot of stuff is going to move in that spectrum, because it's not statically generated or deterministically generated, but it is generated by an agent, and maybe if you modify it too, you go through an agent or an AI to modify it. So I think the value of code on average will change, and I think that's going to have some dramatic consequences in near, on longer term future. And
Yeah. Well, we have to just train ourselves before we even think about where that's going to go. I've run into this a few times. So we added this new feature when the agent needs human input, it's done
Yeah.
or needs your confirmation, it plays a sound. That is an
Yeah.
awesome feature. And that's the kind of
Yeah.
thing where we're just going to make it the default because we need to just be opinionated
Yeah.
here. And I went and looked at the code, and it was littered with any types, and it was jammed over in here. It was not in the right place. I had this moment of realization where, why do we get worried about that? Why do we get worried about bad code? It's not just because, oh, this code is bad and it could cause a bug. It's because we think there's some human that fundamentally misunderstands how the system works, and they're going to go and make that mistake a ton of other times. And they spent a lot of time doing that. And so they had a lot of
Yeah.
wasted time. But none of that is true. Now you have the other worry that the agent is going to make a lot of mistakes and mess up the code, and that's really valid. But it's more like random with the agent, whereas if human has a misunderstanding, they're biased in that direction. They're always going to have that misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter as much. And if I had actually known that this code was written by this quick prompt, it was a quick hack, and he wanted to see how it worked, and the feature ended up being awesome, that is such a big win. But I didn't know that, and I had to kind of reset my initial reaction to it, which is like, an any type, what the hell?
Yeah. It's strange. I don't know yet how to formulate this, but I think I said this 5 times on here. Or I don't know. I say this 5 times in every 2 days, but a lot of the way I treated code in the past now seems black and white to me. Like the brushes, every line and how it's formatted, it's a different thing. It's similar to what you describe. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but you look at the code in a different way, and then it becomes, I don't know, easier to change, or it becomes less bad if it's bad or something. And I also don't, it's not vibe coding. It's not, I don't care what the code looks like. It's a different thing. The level of abstraction is a different thing. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you can worry about, the function names, or whether it's, camel case or stuff like this. But I don't know. I feel like, whether it's camel case or whatever else, kebab case, I don't know. It's right now with these tools, it doesn't matter that much. Like, it's just because you're on another level of abstraction most of the time. And
Right.
I think,
and if the kind of weirdness, messiness, verbosity isn't a well encapsulated part of the code base,
yes,
it's really valuable if you can get over yourself and say, you know what, that is okay. And the reality is, today you're using open source code that's probably written in a totally shitty way. You pull it in transitively, you don't even know. So you've gotten used to that. And believe me, people took a while to get used to that, but people have gotten there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, it's going to change stuff. And to go back to controversial statements, we said this in a different conversation. You said it, and it kind of shocked me with how shocking it is and how obvious it is. But you said open source is going to lose value in some sense. And I want to frame it, before I want you to explain it, I want to add something else to this, which I keep coming back to, which is Eric Meyer saying, why search for code? Like, why find the perfect library if you can have something write it for you? And I said this yesterday to a colleague. I said, when you look up something or you use a library, the problem you're facing is you don't know how to write a certain piece of code, or you don't want to spend the time to write a certain piece of code. And say AI was perfect in generating code, why would you go and pull in a library?
Yeah.
If you could have it generate for you. And yes, there are advantages to somebody else maintaining some piece of code that you use. But I think
there's also disadvantages.
There's disadvantages. And if this option is now in the equation, I think it's going to change the outcome a little bit. It's why would I mean, to an extreme, NPM, right? You have like 3-line of 3 function packages, right? As an extreme, right? For example, I remember this was years ago. I used like a little helper to use like ASCII characters to print stuff yellow and red and blue on the CLI. And somebody commented on my PR saying, you should use the library for this. And it was truly like 4 functions,
I love it because ANSI is literally like the Standards Institute. And it's something that has not changed in 50 years and will not change for another 50 years.
Yes, it's just because you don't like the escape characters in there, you think it should use library. But for this stuff, right, you can have an AI generate a colorize function any day now, like
Yeah.
any second, in less than a second,
Yeah.
So
And all of okay, actually, I won't go on that soapbox, but I did have this um, for a lot of cases. One that stands out to me is the Sonner component in AMP, where when you like copy link to clipboard, it shows that little notification in the bottom right. That's called a
yeah,
Sonner. Who knew?
yeah,
And there's some libraries that did this, and they were very complex. They didn't quite work with the version of SvelteKit we were using, and they required like a different way of doing styling, and that's what everyone was
yeah.
recommending. But turns out, I mean, AI just wrote one that was exactly what we needed, very simple, and that is way simpler and better. So I didn't use a library in
Yes.
that case.
Yeah. And I mean, to extrapolate, right? We saw last week, OpenAI launching new image generation stuff, people using it to generate, assets for games, sprites and whatnot, or like little icons or something. And yes, it's right now not feasible. It's too expensive. It's too slow, blah, 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 blah. But looking at the trajectory, as an example here, like what we have an icon library, right? And it's this, oh, we should use an icon library because we need like these 5 icons and whatsoever. Can you generate SVGs that easily in the future? Can you say, here's like rough drawings, generate these as icons, and then give me a icon library? And that again diminishes the value of pulling in external dependencies, because the value of I couldn't have written it myself, or the value of it would have taken me too long to write it, has decreased.
Yeah.
So
But so in that case, I think that you want something more than just on the fly when the dev needs something, generate the icon. You want consistency across icons. If two things are the same thing, you want it to reuse the same icon,
yeah,
and you want it to fit in with the overall feel. So even that, it's more than just, oh, YOLO, it's so easy. You still want
yeah.
some kind of layer over it, which is interesting. And that's a new thing that people don't yet have.
Yes, I just think that a lot of dev tooling is about, in an abstract sense, it's about generating code. It's about, you could write this code yourself, you could type it all out, but instead you use a library, or you use a function, or you use some other assets, or use something that somebody else has generated for you. Now, with LLMs, we can generate code. And I think that changes a lot of stuff. And I tweeted this yesterday, and people didn't realize it was a joke, or that I meant it in a fun way. But I said, I saw 5 blog posts where people writing their own static site generator. And I said, when is the first static site generator going to come out that uses an LLM, where you pass a markdown file to the LLM and say, turn this into HTML? And then someone was like, why would I do this? It's too slow. And I'm like, yes, sure. But don't you see, like, all static site generators are built because we want to turn markdown, like we have a specific input format that we want to turn into a specific other format. We put the restriction on ourselves to write in this format so it can be turned in this other thing. But technically, with an LLM as a site generator, you could write your blog post as a handwritten note and take a photo and put it in the repo. You could write your blog post as a paint bitmap drawing. You could write it as like a series of emojis and or video, and you could pass all of that to an LLM and have it generate your blog post for you. Because ultimately the goal is that you have an HTML file, and now you can have arbitrary inputs. And it's I think it's funny and interesting, because I think it changes how we think about computation. It's also why I didn't sleep. I stayed up late thinking about this. But I think the same effect will happen with software, and it will happen with the value of software. And to zoom out historically, before open source, I mean, most people can't imagine, right? But before open source, like, where did you get your code? You had to write your own libraries, or you paid somebody else to do it. That's why open source was so revolutionary, because suddenly you could pull all of that stuff together and build your app by tying other stuff together. Now, with code becoming cheaper, how does the value of open source change, right? How does the value of code hosts change?
Yeah. I mean, it went from being very expensive to get new code written to, for a lot of kinds of code, to being free, but there's a search cost, a quality cost, and it's not infinitely comprehensive. And now, you still have quality concerns, as you do with open source and code that you write. The search cost and the variety, search costs are way lower. The variety is way greater. So It's kind of like, the next, it's like what open source did to the previous world, this is doing open source. And so
Yes.
then it raises a lot of questions like, where will all that energy go? Where will the developer reputation nexus be? What
Yeah,
will happen
interesting.
to GitHub's kind of community and moat
Yeah.
and the code repository? What needs to change? If AI is generating the vast majority of the code in a repo, do commits matter as much? What does matter? What do you want to know in terms of the transcript of, why this was made?
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah,
much
that's
changes.
interesting. Yeah, like, I think, I don't know, speculation, I think that, I mean, it's kind of already decreased, right? But I think the GitHub contribution chart and whatnot, it has been gamed a lot. But um there was already the problem of cheap commits where people would push something every day and blah blah blah, and wasn't high quality stuff. And now, with the push of a button, I can generate new code every time I sit down and commit it. But that's not a
Yeah.
real contribution, so that's already happening. The
Yeah.
devaluation.
How do you know if someone's a good developer?
That's a good question. I mean, coming back to what we talked about last time, I think there's still a lot of knowledge required to make it generate stuff. It's not, I mean, obviously there's another school of thought where people think it's going to replace engineers, but I think you still need expertise and experience in guiding these tools,
Yeah.
generating code and whatnot. I don't know how that'll show up. I mean, interviewing is famously hard. We both know this.
Yeah. It
Question
feels
is, how do you
like
test?
the actual skill set will change, but there will always be some kind of skill set that can make an LLM's output much more valuable than if it was in the hands of someone without that skill set.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I
whatever that
think
skill set is, we're probably going to call that being a software engineer.
that's true. I mean, most people say, right? It's going to be more product focused people, you need to think about the product, right? You need to think about what it is that you're shipping, because that becomes much more important.
I mean, hasn't that always been
I've
important for
Yeah,
devs?
I would say so, but I do think that, I mean, I've had email interactions with lots of people saying, I don't like AI because I like writing the code. Like, I like the typing, I like the lines,
Yeah.
I like how it's formatted, I like organizing stuff into modules. And I think
Same.
that's, well,
I like all those things, but I also like AI. And I think you do too, right?
I did, but then it's like, I also like being efficient and not wasting time. And then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I can spend 5 minutes moving this from this file and seeing what that feels like, or I can just not worry about it because I don't have to touch this again. And
Yeah.
that changed a lot of stuff for me. And it made me realize that I do love typing. I'm really good at typing. I can type really fast. I'm pretty good at writing code. But I also realized, like, the need to be efficient and to not waste time out trumps that. And,
Yeah.
maybe for others it doesn't. And they think I still like writing every line.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Totally.
it's
I can't read fiction. I can't do puzzles because they feel like, what's the point? I only read nonfiction. That's just who I am. And it's weird, but yeah,
yeah, I get it. Yeah. I tried to play Grand Theft Auto 5 again, like, half a year ago, to relax. And I realized I lost the ability to do this. Like, I'm in the video game and it's like, go here and do this. I'm like, I could solve actual tasks instead of doing this. I'm like, I want to write this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Why should I go to the shop? And it felt like not relaxing at all. It felt like I'm doing the thing. I don't know. Like, it felt like a waste of time. I think that's what you mean with puzzle. Like, it's an
Yeah.
artificial puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think happens to the code host in a world where, a lot of people just go to it for code review? What if you're not doing code review or it's in a different way? What happens to the code host?
Yeah, I think, in my vision, I think the code host is not a place anymore to which you push committed static code. I think, in my vision, it's more a thing where you store your code and the agents and the prompts along it. Like, it's not, the code is stored over here and it's edited over here. I think ultimately we move to a world where, like I joked on Saga, 555 call my code base, and then, you have something else edited. And I mean, obviously there's been a lot of dreams about this, remote dev environments and all of that stuff. But I think something changed. And I think when you start to you mentioned the audio feature. You set the agent off, you go do something else, and then it gives you a ping sound, and then it's like your code is ready, and you check the code. And when you do that a bunch of times, you realize, why should I check out the repo and do this myself? Like, why can't I have like an agent running next to my code and maintaining it? And I can send a message to the agent and say, please update this. I don't know. You could argue it's two different platforms, or you could argue it's the same as with, developer tooling, or with dev environments. But I don't know. I just, we built the thread sharing. I think that's going to play a bigger role. What do you think?
Yeah, it feels like there's a bunch of different silos of information and action. You got your editor, but you want to be able to kick off the same kind of agent work from the web or from your phone. Like when you know that the class of problems it can solve very reliably, then you want to do it from your phone. Like I've been out with the kids and someone says, oh, here's a bug, and I want to just go fix it or something. Yeah. And it feels like such an artificial limitation that, it works in my editor on my machine, but not here. And I know that I could do a fixed amount of work that's not hard to go make it so some remote dev environment could, run it. And why haven't we done that yet? Why haven't remote dev environments taken off yet? I think it's an incentives problem, because it never could have been your main development environment. So it'd be a fraction of the human team using it, but now AI can use it. And we see a ton of people in our repo just in the commit message, including a link to the thread that was the main one behind the commit. That kind of association should be done automatically. And they really should be one and the same. When you're reviewing that change, you want to just look at the thread. And so I just don't see a world where these are all separate. And then if I put myself in the shoes of GitHub, it is such a big change to do that. Can you imagine how controversial it would be? They already got so much flack by saying we're refounded based on AI.
Yeah.
Like, first off, props to them. Like, I love GitHub. Props to them for doing Copilot. But it is such a hard change for them to make.
Yeah.
So who's going to do it?
It's every I don't know, like every developer is emotionally attached to this not changing, I think. Like as long as they haven't found the way to look at this, which gives them a sense of joy, or, I don't know, some interest in this, or I don't know, fascination with it. And I don't know, nobody wants to admit it. Like it's I cannot believe that I'm even believing this, because I was so invested in writing code by hand and, got code printed out on my wall here.
You wrote books about how people can write code to write code.
Yes. This is why I couldn't sleep last night. So in my head, I was writing this blog post, and guess what? The blog post is, I don't know what there's beauty in AI. That's a draft title. I'm looking at it, right? And basically, in my head, I stayed up because I was thinking of everything I would have to put in the disclaimer, to not have people dismiss me immediately, because this is the internet, right? So in my disclaimer, I would have said, I probably, if you're reading this, I probably have written more code than you. Like, I'm top something % in amount of code written in my life. And I've written books about code. I've written compilers. I made more commits to my Vim RC than most of you reading this. Like, I truly care about code. That's the whole disclaimer. And then I kept thinking, what else do I need to add to make people get it, that I'm not like an AI slob hype boy who thinks code is bullshit and just vibe code everything and blah, blah, blah. But I truly believe that there's a beautiful thing about how we can take these huge matrices and turn them into text transformation engines, where you think really hard about input and what do you put in the context and how you navigate the latent space, and then what do you get out of it. And once you've seen that happen and you work in developer tooling, you start to realize that most of developer tooling is about text transformation. And now we have like these huge orbs that can do magical things, where you can put fuzzy stuff in and they can put out a code, working code, and it has to change stuff. And yeah, I forgot what my point was, but this is the thing that I keep thinking about.
So when you think about the disclaimer, there's no disclaimer that can stave off the hordes from the internet. But what have you found actually converts somebody from this cynic to starting to see that, hey, there's actually something here? Because you've done that to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think What worked for me is just yesterday, right? I showed a demo of Cerebras, which is, Cerebras builds chips, GPUs. They're really fast. You can get thousands of tokens per second on small models, but I think they will get bigger models. And when most people think of AI, they think about, oh, ask it something, then it takes a while, then comes back and, it's wrong. Now I have to retry it. And then their mind goes to, I can write the code myself by hand now, and it's much faster. And I show them Cerebras and how fast it can generate code, and something clicks because they realize, oh, if the models will be this fast in the future, like 1,000 tokens per second or 2,000 or 3,000, that's going to change stuff, because then suddenly, it's not about waiting for something comes back and I can do it faster. No, it can now do it faster than you. And even if it's like, if it's only 70% of the time correct, you can hit that retry button and it's still faster than you. Because then you can think, okay, I could have loops running that validate this against my language server and whatnot. And then it doesn't matter whether it's wrong on the first try, because it's still faster than what I could write. So that's one thing that convinces people, or I think changes their view on things. And then the other thing is just...
And do you think that's because people have the intuition that you could have a kind of rough or lossy objective function, and if you're talking about iteration cycles in terms of like minutes, because LLMs are slow, then the objective function, there's no way that it's going to climb that hill. But if you can like throw 1,000 things or 1,000,000 things against the wall, like monkeys typing on a typewriter, do you think that's where the intuition comes from? Have you ever plumbed their mind?
No, not in that sense. But I do think, based on my own experience, I think it's this. It felt like you cannot program these things, and it felt like a coin toss every time. Like you would ask it, and it's like, this is not why I came here to do programming to toss coins and have unreliable stuff. But, the other thing that I think changes a lot of perspectives is, or changed mine certainly, is first time I tried, this was last year, like half a year ago, Cursor Tab, which is what we have in Kodi now. Kodi auto edits and others have it now. But I was editing a file and just trying this out, and it would show tab to go here, tab to go here, tab to go here. And I realized at that moment that I'm pretty good with Vim, and these are not super smart AGI level suggestions, but they took away a lot of toil and they made my typing, unimportant. Why worry about having Colmac to type some Vim macros faster when a small model can, in 200 millis, can say, you want to remove this line down here, hit tab and do it. If you want to do this. And I think that is a change in how you frame this, going from, this big all-knowing oracle that I ask questions about code, to this mechanical helper that can type faster than I can, and it can see ahead, and just takes away mechanical stuff and toil and chores. And
so it's not magic. It's a mechanical helper that you can program. That it's not deterministic in the way that we think about it. I mean, it is. If you do the ordering of the float operations. Demystifying it. And I think that one of the things we want to do in this podcast, and with the AMP, which we're building, is we want to make the thing that is not claiming to be perfect, that's not claiming to one shot. We want to highlight when it doesn't work and what we do when it fails. And so you and Byong, you've started recording these raw demos, and we're going to have a lot more, which is not, hey, we do it 50 times, we cherry pick the one where it works. But actually, it's really valuable to see when it doesn't work the first time, how can we nudge it? I was just doing that a bunch, and it was doing some dumb shit on 2 of the files that it edited out of like 14. And, I had to nudge it. That's what I think people would benefit from seeing.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a framing of, it's a framing of expectations, or how you set the expectations. And I think people have been kind of misled, or there's like the overall hype about AI and what it can do, and you just ask it stuff and it comes back. And I think that's due to the providers, at least OpenAI or Perplexity, or some, I don't know, not Perplexity, but there's a lot of hype, and I think they kind of mix this with programming. And I think a lot of that is the wrong way to look at it. You shouldn't look at it as, I don't have to write any code anymore. You should look at it as, this is like the text editor. Like, this is a thing that I direct. This is an extension of me into which I put my knowledge and my, requirements. And then I I select the input or you still have to do it. And, in parentheses here, with the models getting better, that will change. The exact form will change. But I think this is the framing. Like, it's an extension of you, and you have to still direct it and guide it. And it can often fail. And yesterday I had it fail like for 2 hours. I was trying some stuff, and every time it failed, I realized I forgot to mention that it shouldn't do this. And then I went back up to the prompt and I started a new thing, and I kind of refined my stuff. And I then sat there thinking, did I save time now? Did this make me faster? And the conclusion I came to was, if I had not used AMP for this, I would have started writing code, and then after 5 minutes go, oh, it's actually harder than I thought it would be. And then maybe I would procrastinate or try a different approach or update the ticket or let somebody know it's going to take 2 days instead of one. Or I would do something and after 20 minutes realize this is not going to work. So I first have to do this. And, you lose motivation. And it happens to me 1,000 times, 2,000 times. And with AMP,
we've got a special responsibility as people building this tool. And so many, not every, but so many of the times where it fails in a dumb way, it's obvious to me that we could detect that kind of failure mode and come up with a protection. Now you run the risk of, is it going to be whack-a-mole? And if you layer all these on, but in my case, I was making it so that you can share these threads without being authenticated. And it completely clobbered a SvelteKit page and a server file. And given the prompt that I gave it, should know, like a dumb LLM would know that under no circumstances should it clobber one of those files. And so now it's on us. How can we build that kind of like feedback loop or guardrail in? And it feels like that is a valuable kind of component. But like, how do we make it so it's not just endless edge cases like that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the big challenge. One last, we could end, like, I think this is a good thing to end it on because it's open-ended. But one last thing on this. Yesterday, while I was failing to do stuff, talking about guardrails, it just kind of, like, I wrote this whole prompt, and then it went off and did something. And then I realized I included the wrong component in the prompt. Okay, my bad. I redid the prompt. Okay, I did this other thing, and it just went off, and like, why did it do this? And after the second time I realized it's because I had this other file open, and it knew that I had this file open. So it thought, surely you want me to look at this too and put this in this component. And so for me, it was this, I closed all of the files, and basically, this is Skyros. I basically said, remove all of the distractions. Don't worry about what I'm doing over here. Just focus on these 2 files. And I don't know how we solve this, but I think this is, you kind of want to give them like, tunnel vision in some cases and say, like, you only focus on this and you only see this, but you don't want to take the peripheral vision away, which often helps them. So, I don't know, big problem.
Yeah, big problem. And whack-a-mole will not work. So I'm very interested in what we can do with thread sharing and the ability to have more insights into where it failed than I think other tools that do not have that.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Lots to do.
Lots to do.
All right. Then until next time. Bye-bye.
Coding.